Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Alison. I am a novelist and I write as Alison May, 50% of Juliet and most recently Sinclair. And here on YouTube I talk about writing, publishing and all things related. Now, last week we were talking about the point where your book sucks. And it's just awful and you don't want to continue and blah, and how to work through that, hopefully. And today we're going to talk about kind of the flip side of that. So that point where your book sucks, that's kind of like when you feel like your book is pushing you away. But sometimes you feel like you're being pulled away from the novel you're supposed to be writing. When you have one of those, ooh, shiny thing moments where suddenly you've got a brand new idea, and obviously the brand new idea is much more interesting and exciting than the idea you've been slogging away at for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And your brain is saying to you, you know what you should do? You should abandon the thing you've been slogging away at for weeks and weeks and weeks. You should write the shiny new thing. Shiny new. So, what do you do when the shiny new thing is calling and the book you've been slogging away at for weeks and weeks and weeks just feels turgid and like you don't want to do anymore? Let's talk about the shiny things. So, I'm going to give you essentially three options for what you do when that shiny thing is niggling away at you and going, write me, write me, write me. And option one is the most simple, but also probably in some ways the hardest to actually do. And option one is that you just ignore it. There are always going to be other ideas. There are always going to be things that pop into your head. There are always going to be things that pop up and go, write me, I'm more interesting. And 90% of the time, they're not actually more interesting. A lot of the time, they're not even actually particularly good ideas. I don't know if you ever get that thing where you like dream something and like while you're dreaming it, even while you're asleep, there's a part of your brain going, oh, this is a brilliant idea. I could write a book based on this. And then when you wake up in the morning and try and like explain your own idea back to yourself, it goes, okay, so there was the guy off of Countdown, and then there was a dragon, and we were on a beach, and then some clowns came, but then it wasn't a beach, it was more like a lake, I think, and then, yeah, I can't remember. And actually, the things that make perfect sense while you're fast asleep make no sense at all in the cold light of day. And a lot of what feel like brilliant ideas have that problem as well. Even what feels like a really good hook, you might come up with a kind of one-line idea, pops into your head and you think, oh, that's so brilliant, I want to write that. But actually, if you sit down and think about it, there's nothing behind that one line. You don't have a story, you don't have any characters, you don't have a setting. All you have is one line. And so you can, very simply, just ignore it. You're probably not losing anything. I think sometimes as writers we're really terrified that if we don't capture an idea right now, we'll lose it and it'll have gone. But firstly, there are always more ideas, so if you do lose this one, it's not the end of the world. And secondly, a lot of the time, I think if they're any good, they do come back round again. They pop back into your brain later or in a different form, or when you're writing something else, it kind of starts to seep in there. So, number one, option one, just ignore it. And a lot of the time, I think that really is the best option. But not always. So, what if you can't just ignore it? What if that idea is like in your brain going, hello, hello, write me, I'm here, I'm great, you should write me down, I'm really important, I'm a great idea, I'm a much better idea than that book, definitely write me, write me, write me, write me, write me. And you just can't let it go. This is what I usually do, and this is what I would suggest as a really kind of good practice, is that you need to find a way to park that idea. So you're not going to lose it. You're going to give yourself the option of coming back to it later, but you're not going to let it derail the thing that you're actually working on now. So what I usually quite often do is I will literally set a timer, usually for half an hour, definitely not for more than 1 hour. And I will brain dump. Usually I do it on computer because I type faster than I handwrite. But you can do it handwriting if that works for you, or you can just do a voice recording if that works for you. I just brain dump everything I can think of associated with that idea, whether that ends up being like a kind of pitch document, it might be some character stuff, it might even be like half a scene. Sometimes a scene comes into your head and you don't really know what that scene is part of, but there's an inkling of something there. So it might be bits of scenes, and I just brain dump everything that is floating around in my head associated to the shiny new idea, and then I save it and I don't let myself look at it again until I finish the thing I'm writing at the moment. I think that's really, really good practice. It stops, hopefully, rattling around your brain going, pay attention to me, because you've paid some attention to it. It takes away that anxiety that you're going to lose this really good idea, which is probably only a moderately good idea at best, realistically, but you never know. And it gets it kind of out of your system. And then when you are ready to pick it up, it's there for you to look at. Honestly, at least half the time when I look at it again, I go, yeah, I'm not actually that keen on that. There's not that much there. The shininess and the excitement comes from the fact that it's new, and that it's not the thing that you're having to grind and work really hard at. It's new and it's shiny, and because it's so new, you haven't worked out all the things that don't work yet. You haven't yet perceived all the ways it will go horribly wrong, and it just feels exciting because it's new. A lot of the time, if you take that 30 minutes or an hour to get the idea out of your system and park it, when you do come back at it weeks or months later, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure why I thought that was great. It's fine, but so getting it out of your system can be really helpful. Option 3, and I think some of you might be a little bit surprised to hear me suggest this, is that, yeah, you could write the shiny thing first. Sometimes, obviously, you can't. If you've got a contract and you've got a deadline and you have told an editor, I am writing X, you can't then deliver Y, at least not without having a big talk with them first. So sometimes you really absolutely legally can't write it first. But if you're not under contract, or if your contract is vague and just says another romantic comedy, and both the ideas are romantic comedy, maybe you can just write it first. There are some ideas that kind of feel very of the moment, and there is a real benefit into getting them down and getting them done quickly. I've literally only done that once in a 10-year career of being a published author, and it was for Season for Love, the book that came out in January this year, and it was because that idea popped into my head, probably the most fully formed of any idea I've ever had. And I went, okay, well, I'm in the middle of writing something else. The something else wasn't under contract, so I could park it, but I didn't really want to because I was a good distance in. But I went, okay, well, I'm in the middle of something else, so I'm going to do my trick where I give it half an hour, brain dump this idea down. But after I'd given it half an hour, by the end of that time, I essentially had all my main characters. I had the setting, I had all the key plot points, I had the structure of the book, and it was all there. And I looked at it and I thought, I could write this, and I could write this really fast, actually. And that for me was the decider, was that I was fairly confident that I wasn't going to be abandoning the thing I was working on for 6 months or a year. I was going to be abandoning it for 8-12 weeks. And in the end, I delivered that book to my agent, I think pretty much exactly 12 weeks after I started writing it. And that included editing the draft, so that was a kind of polished version sent to my agent. So that for me was the decider. This idea is all here, it's fully formed, there aren't any big holes. I know what it is, I know the world, I can hear these characters' voices, and I think I can write this really quickly. And in that case, the particular idea was about a social season in the style of a Regency social season transplanted to the 21st century. And the time when I had that idea, Bridgerton was on TV on Netflix. There seemed to be a little bubble of kind of Regency set rom-coms, so set in the Regency period with a kind of slightly more modern sensibility. And I was writing something set in the modern period with a kind of hint of Regency romance tropes and ideas to it. So it just kind of felt very of the moment, and it felt like this is going to have a better chance of selling now than if I leave it for 6 months and then write it. As it turned out, I was completely wrong about that. It took like a year to sell that book. I could have written it second. Who knew? Never mind. But it felt like this book feels very of the moment, and so I quite wanted to get it out quickly. So sometimes the thing to do is to write the shiny new idea first. The little asterisk I'd put on that was a same asterisk as I think I put on what we talked about last week about when books suck. If you are a serial starter of novels, if you are someone who often gets to 10,000 words, 20,000 words, 30,000 words, 40,000 words, and then your brain goes, shiny new idea, maybe this is the time when you need to find that discipline to go, I am going to finish this first. Because finishing a novel is the single most helpful thing you can do on your journey to being a published novelist. That sounds really obvious. If you don't finish a novel, you're never going to be a published novelist. But in terms of professional development as well, you will learn so much more about the structure of a novel, the story arc of a novel, the amount of story and character development you need to sustain a novel by finishing a full draft manuscript than you will by going, oh, this isn't working, I'm going to start something else. Even if it's not very good, just finishing something and having the whole story arc there is going to teach you so much. Cough break. So, those are my thoughts on what to do when you have a shiny new idea. 3 choices. Just ignore it. Give it its moment in the sun. Take half an hour or an hour, make some notes, and then park it. Or actually write it first. With the subnote that you should only actually write it first if you're not in the habit of never finishing stuff. If you're in the habit of never finishing stuff, make the thing you're writing now the thing you finish. So that is today's video. How to deal with the shiny new thing. Next week we will be doing some book reviews, and I think we're going to talk a bit about reviews, why they're so important to authors, what you should think about if you're writing or sharing reviews, stuff like that. So I will see you next week.